Welcome to the Chico Bag Podcast, where we explore how we can leave everything better than we found it. I'm your host, Andy Keller, and today we have an incredible guest joining us, Jordan Howard. Jordan is a renowned sustainability strategist, speaker, and policy expert who has spent years in the intersection of climate action, storytelling, and advocacy. She's worked with leading brands, policymakers, and grassroots movements to drive real change and how we approach sustainability and social impact. In this episode, we're going to dive into Jordan's journey, her insights, and the evolving landscape of environmental activism, and how businesses and individuals like you can create meaningful, lasting change. If you're passionate about sustainability and looking for fresh perspectives on how to make a difference, this conversation is for you. Jordan, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Andy. Hello.
Hello. Well, it's nice to have you. We've known each other for a long time.
We had.
Yes, we met, I believe, when you were 15.
I was.
Right?
It was at the very, very beginning, at the precipice of all of this.
So that was back in what year? Let's see.
2007?
2007.
2006. Yeah, 2006. 2006.
So, I mean, you've grown into a real change maker, and I met you when you got your start. You've done some fantastic things, and I'd love to hear about some of the insights and journeys that you've had, and in the process of you sharing, maybe you can help us understand some key things that you've learned in regard to sustainability and social justice.
Amazing. Yes. I think it's a special time. It's a treacherous time in so many ways, but it's also the special time. It was when we met that weekend, actually. It was either Bioneers or Green Festival. We were we're walking the halls, and this is my first conference, and I'm a kid at the same time. But we're walking the halls of vendors and looking at the solutions. And I remember you and ChicoBag being one of those representations of, wait, this is so much bigger than your environmental science teacher talking to you. It's so much bigger than I went to a Burning Man high school. Like my teachers, board members who are all burners. So I was in a different space and a different journey, but you immediately saw that world that they were crafting was so much bigger because you had companies stepping up and saying, okay, look, here's this product, here's this solution, but then also took that inspiration as, okay, wow, how do we share about the issues? How do we share about the solutions? How do we teach consumers how to buy them? But also, how do we get adults to understand who millennials are as millennials were growing up, who Gen Z is? What does it mean to work through different generations and learn about different people and learn about experiences, and that being enough to shift our thinking in terms of communicating knowledge, communicating facts, communicating science, but then also putting people in the position to be able to impact and affect change. And that's what it's really been. Like you say, the boardrooms, the brands, the people, the networks, the relationships. It's really been about, how do we teach people that experts are experts of their experience? How are we putting science-based facts on the table first, but also, how are we inviting a space for solutions?
And you've had a lot of experience in this. So you've met with big brands and you have helped them understand this next generation that's coming up and what they care about and how to engage with them. And what do business owners need to know about your generation and other generations behind you, or maybe a little bit ahead of you, that how do we talk to your generation?
The first thing we do is we talk. That's the first thing. We talk to each other. We make spaces to talk to each other and listen to each other. I am a product of so much of that. And that meaning adults just having a conversation with me, even though there's difference in our age, our ethnicity, our parents, our background. And once we have that conversation, you cut through so many of what you assume to be differences. And you find out that, wait, we actually have a whole lot more in common, even though I was over here when you were experiencing that. I was in this part of my life journey when you were experiencing that. It's not that different. And that's why I invite the first one just be, we create the space, we chat, we listen. It was a lot of teaching brands how to make space, because that's before you listen, you have to make space to listen. So how are you inviting the next generation into the brief? How are you inviting them into the tables? Is there an advisory board? Is the advisory board monthly, weekly, annually? How often are you talking to people of a different generation and setting up that space? Or even then you take it to the next level. How are they a part of your workforce? How are you making space for them as employees? Are you thinking about it in a larger level? Are you going outside of college when you're talking about a youth generation? Finding those different verticals where you could be missing out on people, but it's really that number one part is making space to listen, but then also that action. How are you investing in the action? How are you taking what you listen? We do a lot of listening. We do a lot of surveying, but How are you also being accountable for what you heard after you surveyed? Are you taking action on that? And who are you putting in place to ensure that this mission can be solved? Or you've explored it and you've asked those important questions.
When I think about space, I always think about a boardroom or a conference table and having a chair, for the person, for the voice that isn't represented at the table, right? So there's a lot of times, I'm in a meeting and it's a bunch of people my age, people who think just like me, but we're trying to figure out how to solve a problem. And I think it's a really good reminder. And I appreciate you saying that, because it's really important to bring in other voices, people who aren't at the table, so you can see the blind spots that you may have, with your own, upbringing and biases and, worldview. You can be blinded to a whole different way to look at it.
And also that innovation that comes out of just different conversations of difference. The innovation. I remember even I was with a healthcare startup, and we were in a very early journey of the healthcare startup, and it was all about millennials. That's why they had me at the table. We did focus groups with them. And in those focus groups, listening to the language and how these 6 different people that had different journeys, but how they talked about healthcare was different. How they talked about the role of healthcare in their life was different. We left that meeting with different words. We left that meeting with different direction. We left that meeting even like rethinking and reshaping and relearning our role for them, and what this product that we knew wanted to build had the data, had the facts, had the ecosystems and the journeys. But it was through this just 2 hours of sitting and listening and just hearing, oh, wait, actually, we should be moving into this direction, because this is what the audience that we want to reach says is important to them.
I really like the idea of listening to the voices and to opening up our minds to different ways of seeing it as a way to, drive better results. And when I think about the voices that aren't at the table, a lot of times I think about the things that don't even have voices, So when you think about sustainability, future generations, for example, that are most impacted by the decisions we're making today aren't at the table. Yep. So I know you've done a lot of work in environmentalism, sustainability, and social justice. So what is the connection between these different, seemingly disparate disciplines? Like, how are they all connected?
It's why I'm outside. It's why I spend so many times. And even if you have a meeting with me, I'm outside, and they're laughing, and they're like, Jordan's outside. Well, one, I don't like to believe in ceilings. There's no ceilings. But also it's the air. Whenever I am walking, wherever I am walking, at whatever time I am walking, I am sharing air with people, with the environment, with the wildlife. We are unfortunately not Sandy in SpongeBob. We can't create our own space and our own air, and we're sharing this environment, and it is that rethinking and repositioning. I remember so many as a kid, it's like how many stages, how many thousands of people and times that I would say people and the planet. And over the last 3 years of my life, I've shifted that, and it's like, wait a minute. But what if it's just for the planet? What if it is just for the wildlife? What if you are just making space for the voices that aren't present, the people that aren't here? What if it is just a dedication for 7 generations? And then I learned about African spirituality, and they're like, oh, no, actually, African spirituality says 16 generations.
16 generations.
16. And just what does it look like to put that on the space? If you go to a Procter and Gamble and say, how is your supply chain looking at the next 16 generations? But you go to Harvard University and MIT and Stanford and even the community college down the street, there are people and scientists who have the learnings to be able to move that forward. Like the tools are available. The technology is available for us to be thinking in that scale and that long. We just aren't, we don't have the courage to just stand and sit on that, because it takes a lot of reimagining and shifting and moving and rethinking. But why not?
I resonate with that, because supply chain, in my business is where I spend a lot of time, because what I've learned over my time of being a business person is the supply chain is where most of the damage happens. And a lot of the sustainability environmental movement is focusing on the consumer and recycling and, making green choices. But you could buy the greenest product, but if it has a dirty supply chain, it is no better. Or if it's not built to last, it's no better, or it's worse than some of the conventional counterparts. So I'd be curious to learn more about what insight you've gained in regard to, cleaning up a supply chain or having a transparent supply chain, or what kind of learnings or insight can you share with us?
It's interesting. I think that's where the most of the work is. It's been when I've been invited in, I'm usually invited in as the expert, the one that can come in and talk about millennials. I'm not there for a long time. So a lot of times I don't even have to have that nasty conversation with you about how your supply chain is trash and it's polluting these people over here, these people over here, this air over there, this air over there, because I'm not there that long enough to just bully you into submission. That's not our relationship. I get to be there. I get to be there to bring the solutions. I get to be there to identify the light. But then I step back after my time, and then it's like, oh, well, no. Whoa. If you are with a Procter & Gamble, we could say Procter & Gamble for one. When I went there, it was in the position of, this is the largest marketer in the world that you're meeting with, and media and marketing. And I'm at one of, I think, the 4th or 5th largest media company in the world. And they were trying to get them as a business again for 3 years, $3 billion worth of business. And I'm there, and it was summer after Me Too. So we're talking about we talked about toxic masculinity and got the CMO to push buttons that he hadn't pushed before. But you step back and you think about the supply chain that moves 5.5 billion products we're touching as consumers. 5.5 billion products a day around the world. People are touching something from this company, Procter & Gamble, and it's different names in different countries all over the world. So it is this United Nations of a company, but it means that the ingredients that they're using, the packaging that they're using, the things that they are saying yes to, their executives are very powerful people, and meaning that those shifts that they can make, that they should be investing in and scaling more and more as the problems scale, those investments are big for a lot of people in a very short and quick amount of time.
Sure. Yeah, I've heard something about like just promoting cold water wash, a company like that can, significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions overnight, just simply by saying, this laundry detergent is great in cold water.
Yep. That was what their chief sustainability officer told me when I met her, Virginia Hillis. We're at dinner, first meeting. She tells me that. She's like, well, wait a minute. Let me tell you what I'm doing. Let me tell you what we do. And this is the power that we have over here. What more? What more can we do? What more can I get my folks to see? Because that's big. Like it's easy to talk, and I get flack. It's so funny because now, that to 2018, I get flat for having them in my bio for the grassroots places that I've been in. And I mean, Captain, I spent my weekends as a teenager and then early teens advising and mentoring youth with Captain Charles Moore, who found the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And now I'm finally in the life where I'm on phones meeting people for the first time, and they're like, "You've heard about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like that's Charlie. We're there in Long Beach." But when I'm at the tables now, and these folks with, again, just that different. I came here as a marketer. I came here as a storyteller. I didn't know that the problems of the planet were going to be problems that I needed to listen to solve, to shift, and even be a part of. No one has educated me on this. No one has told me this. And that's what a lot of those executives are saying. You got really, the CMO of Nestle. She's just like, where do we start? Like, whoa, we have to still tell them where to start. But that isn't something that should be so complex. We should have here's the list, here's the drawdown, here's 5, here's 10. Here's a macro, here's a micro, and working with them to undo what has been done.
Yeah. I mean, I always think about it like we're playing a game, right? So I've been trying to help humanity bag the single-use habit, mainly single-use plastics, right? But I'm playing this game and advocating for the change I want on a playing board that is geared towards a totally different game. And it's super hard to make changes when the game board isn't set up for the game you want to play. So for example, I want to stop using single-use items, but, all of a sudden my takeout has a plastic fork in it, or they don't let me walk out without a plastic bag, for example. And then when you look at, I'm trying to make choices as a consumer, and I'm kind of coming up against this kind of game board that is causing havoc in my life and not allowing me to achieve my goal. And then when you look at it from the business standpoint, businesses are playing a game too. And the game they play is how to maximize shareholder value, right? And then there's other stakeholders involved, like their supply chain, the communities that they work in, and they don't have a loud of a voice, and they're serving the shareholder, maximizing profits. And in doing that, the game seems to reward bad behavior in regard to social justice and environmental issues. So I know that you've been involved in policy and policy change. And how do you change the game board so that doing the right thing, doing what is good, is easy, and the thing that makes most sense?
We rewrite the game, Andy. We got to rewrite the game. We need new game boards. We need new game boards with new language. But what comes before that? You have to have the new language in the current game boards. It's why I say yes to the big brands, yes to the dirty supply chains, yes to the dirty names. Because until those worlds are even open, have space for a shift, until you can bring new words, new verticals, new ecosystems in the current ecosystems, you won't even have space for a shift to completely overhaul it and destruct it. Because it's what I learned from companies as big as Procter and Gamble, because they're so big. How do you just delete 5.5 billion products from the world, from consumption? And even, but also too, I mean, think about this. I was in Flint. We built the water box with Jaden Smith while I was at Dentsu. And so we're showing up with a box that has a water filtration system in it, because there's single-use plastic being utilized because the people of a community don't have water due to their elected officials rerouting clean water in a space and not protecting the people's water. And we did this. We were 5 years into the crisis when we showed up. And the church that we made the boxes for, they were distributing water still twice a week in 2019. But that's still a problem. That's still a problem, and is also like what we learned with that. It's a problem all over the country. So I couldn't help but look as we're delivering the box, making sure that it works, filming. I'm inside just looking over it, like, wow, we are in a community of 150,000 people and we're bringing them a box. But this box is going to bring efficiency. It's going to make this process quicker. It's going to, and then you put the plastic on the table. We're not using all of these plastic bottles. There's millions. So there's now millions of plastic bottles that we've diverted by putting these boxes all over the city of Flint, but then they're all over the country as well, because New Jersey has those problems. Jackson, Mississippi has those problems. Uganda has those problems. And there's boxes in those places now, but you still have that function. So, and I say all of that to say there is function in what these products are doing for us due to how we're consuming them across a society. You think about just like fast food, and you said when it comes to single use, all the fast food locations across cities and the tops, the straws, the tiny bits of single-use plastic. But if we imagine, it's like, yes, they're here, they're available, we're consuming them. But if we imagine just using different materials because different materials are available and ready and on shelves, waiting for the right people to use them, waiting for the right people to find the investment in them, find the value in them so that the prices work for business and there's a business model for it, then it works. And it's just, and I sit in the seat always ready to either instigate that change, but also just scale it so it happens quicker. And just, can we call the people with the solutions? Put the people with the solutions on the phone, and can we get them over to Chick-fil-A? Can we get them over to El Pollo Loco? Can we get them over to McDonald's? McDonald's is the largest owner of real estate across the world. There is no one that has more real estate than McDonald's, not even the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church has lots of real estate, but McDonald's still has more. McDonald's still has more. What does that mean for plastic pollution? What does that mean for the ocean? What does that mean for preservation? And my imagination sees being able to flip switches if you have the right people in place, if you have the right technology that's ready, because that's the other part when it comes to paper straws, when we get so much slack from paper straws, and I can't even roll my eyes at Donald Trump because how many times has a paper straw melted in your mouth? It's different for people be like, wow, this don't work. And it has to work. It has to work. And it's okay. It is okay for it to have to work. It's okay for us to have this relationship where I look at my 5-year-old niece, and even in me not having conversations with her about plastic pollution, but the little girl watches every nature doc available on Disney Plus, every nature doc available on Netflix, so much so that we're just having to find random things on YouTube. It's like we got to go down now to like Jack Hanna and Jacques Cousteau's like archive, but she's crazy about the ocean, crazy about animals, crazy about the world, and asks these questions. But then when she has a plastic bottle in her hand, she's like, but Jordan, I'm able to put the top on. I'm able to move around the house. I'm still able to do all of these things that I wouldn't be able to do if I'm just walking around with a lid. But then you have products like this that look like a disposable piece, and it ends up being ceramic and gives you that nostalgia, gives you that story. It ends up, this is a cup made by Graham Hill, but it's one of the top products in the MoMA.
Yeah, and it's made to look like a single-use cup, like it comes out of a automated coffee machine. And I love those kinds of products because I have some reusable plates that look like paper plates, and so it always creates a conversation.
Yeah,
and I think that's what's key, really, is those conversations. And I applaud you for being brave enough to to go into these boardrooms of these giant corporations and to be the voice that, isn't at the table, to educate them and help them see, and these are giant machines. They're hard to change. There's good people in these companies that, want to, do good on the environment, do good, for people on the planet, yet they're dealing with a giant machine, like you said. So you being at the table and others, and I think through this conversation, you're inspiring others that there's an opportunity for people to share their voice, with influential, powerful people that have the ability to make the biggest changes. A small change for them is a huge change globally. And, and that's the way to actually engage. I think a lot of times the environmental community has, like you said, have shunned large corporations or bad players or people who are deemed, not, that's happened for Walmart. Like, let's just boycott something for a day, So, I know being at the table is part of the solution, and I know you've been part of other ways. You did something with the Dodgers. Can you tell everyone listening about what you did with the Dodgers in regard to enacting change with
Yes. So right now we have a campaign currently with Sierra Club, and it was started by this amazing woman, Zandubin Scott, Lisa Cass-Boyle, who's an environmental attorney. Zandubin Scott has been one of the longest EV advocates since the GM's first EV, the EV1. And reason why we have so many electric cars out. And they contacted me about this campaign against Phillips 66 and the Dodgers. And it was perfect for this. Okay, I'm looking at this young person who is 5. We need to do more. I'm looking at water in the ocean in Hawaii. I know all of these brands, these CMOs. We've had these questions, but we talk about the complexities and but also what do you stand for in these moments? What do you stand for and what's the strong stance? Because you can do both. You can do all. And this was a stance against oil advertising. So we're parts of this business, and what Dentsu taught me so much of, and going to a place like Dentsu and just seeing the media deals.
So what did you do with the Dodgers and the oil advertising?
We have a petition where we've been petitioning the Dodgers. There's about 25,000 people who have signed the petition to get the Dodgers to remove Phillips 66 as an advertiser. Phillips 66 is owned by 76, and you see the 76 logo is right on the field. It's one of the big iconic spaces and places for 76 to tell their story as a brand, and Dodgers is a part of that legacy. And that's old business. It's old business that has to go. Like we can't continue to keep this ad business going, because it is what keeps the dirty business of oil going round and round and round, because you get to tell your story, because you get the iconic moments in sports, because you are a part of entertainment and are really funding entertainment. And there's other businesses that could easily do that. That could be a Samsung, that could be I mentioned Procter and Gamble. That could be a different supply chain. It could be a different company quickly.
Yeah. So there's a lot of businesses that know they need to change, right? They know they see it coming. The world's changing, and how do businesses change and keep up, right? To market and be a viable business to the future generations that are coming up. We talked a little bit about, like how do you stay viable? I know you do a lot of work in regard to consulting, in regard to the messaging. So what could Phillips do to stay relevant and still maintain a business, but not be subject to these kinds of protests or petitions?
They can listen and take action as people evolve. And that sounds really bold to say, and it might be scary to do. But why not? Maybe you will stick around. They can listen and evolve as people evolve. And they've already done it, which is interesting enough. They actually announced that they're closing they announced that they're closing one of the oil refineries, which it's about 15 miles from where I am now, maybe 10 miles where I am now. I could see it when I'm walking my dog. It is that close, but it's one of those refineries in a neighborhood. It's in a neighborhood called Wilmington. It's a mostly Latinx neighborhood, mostly immigrant community. And it's right next to an elementary school. There's a woman, her name is Nayeli, and she would tell the story about how she was in middle school and would be able to understand. They knew in middle school what was happening at the oil refinery based on what they heard. So what they heard and what they saw. That's how close they were to this refinery. But Phillips 66 announced that they're closing it down, and they're taking their business out of California, which means that they're taking it somewhere else. But still, that response to this is happening in community, they cited sustainability being one of the reasons why they're closing. But it's that I want to see these refineries close and communities. I want to see them closed. They've also closed the Inglewood oil facility. And even that, we're asking the questions now of, okay, well, what do you do with that space? What do you do with that land? And that's the imagination that we should be inside of in these meetings, because it is a lot of land. It is a lot of space. What does it look like to work the land and rematriate it and get it back healthy, but then also do something that regenerates that land there? And it is dedicated to the environment, not just development on top of it.
Yeah, I know you've done some work in regard to extended producer responsibility, and what comes to mind when I hear of a large corporation exiting, a piece of land that's been used for many years to do oil refinery, I imagine there's a lot of cleanup. So, in regard to extended producer responsibility, where are you seeing? What are some bright spots that you're seeing, and maybe you could define it for people that aren't familiar with the concept.
So extended producer responsibility was a policy that came out of the UK. It was a successful policy that came out of the UK that was basically stating that producers were responsible for the waste management of the packaging that they utilize for products. So what happened was, if you remember the world, because we don't really live in it anymore, these changes happen and we don't really announce and celebrate the changes as we should. And they just we just move along with them. So much so that even Bezos and Amazon are shipping packages, and sometimes they don't even put it in a package anymore. A product would just show up at your doorstep because they've been testing that. And that's EPR. But EPR was what came out of consumers just opening in the UK. They would just open up the packages at the counter and leave it at the counter. So imagine going to Best Buy and you get a SIM card and you just open it up and say, here, leave the trash. It happens so many times that the company called the producers and it's just like, okay, no, you need to get your trash. Come clean for trash. So then they started charging the companies. Then they started charging the companies and saying, okay, well, you need to set aside a percentage in your budget to this trash is yours and dispose of it. So what happens when the trash is yours and you have to dispose of it? You start thinking about efficiency. You start thinking about how to do less. You start thinking about how to be smarter. You start thinking about how to save money and your time. And that's what we're seeing. So much so that, again, Amazon I'll just see the packages sometimes on the doorstep, and it's just like they didn't even put us in a box. They're not, and that's good for us to be thinking and getting sticky in that way. But it's putting the onus and putting the responsibility into the producers lane. And what's happening is politicians are now taking that, and EPR policies are passing all over the country in the U.S. It's what they utilize for the bag ban. It's what they utilize for the styrofoam ban as well. But it's that language of it's the producer's responsibility. Okay, now what do we do? And EPR, it'll be used across ESG and should be used across lifestyle.
So, I mean, that's an example of changing the playing field, changing the game, because, up until this point, producers would create something and then the consumer was responsible, or the community that you lived in was responsible for dealing with it. So it's a huge game changer when the producer has responsibility in the end of life of their product. And ultimately, I mean, that's the right thing to do. If you're going to create something and put it out in the world, you should be thinking about its impact in the end of life and what happens to it and owning that, right?
It's interesting because Dell taught me this, and I wasn't even working with them on this sector when they taught it to me. We did a youth innovation advisory board and created this STEM entrepreneurship program for girls. And I remember speaking to one of the PR execs there, who's now on the CSR team, because that evolution has happened where you go from communications, but she was always on the social good aspect and wanted to do good. And now there's a space and verticals and budget for that. Before it wasn't, and it was happening inside of communications and marketing, and was just, how do we get these pitches going? But I remember the timing where we're in Berlin, and she's telling me the story about them bringing Adrian Grenier in to figure out what they can do for packaging. And that went from, okay, can we take packaging out? Can we take plastic out of the ocean? And I remember telling her that you can't do that. You can't do that. She's like, well, we're researching it, and gets into we have the engineers and we have but that's great. It's great to do that back and forth. It's great for the companies to take that agency on their own and say, okay, how do we put our engineers up to the test to ask the hard questions? How do we get them to start doing that rethinking? How do we get them to just get sticky with what's possible and where could it lead to? And then within, it was like 3 to 4 years where they had mushroom packaging all across their, and we're using mushroom packaging all across their supply chain. We're getting...
And that's the packaging to protect the computer. So instead of using polystyrene or styrofoam, they're using something that you can put in your compost pile?
They've been using biodegradable mushroom packaging.
Wow.
Using biodegradable mushroom packaging. And this was 2014, 14, 15, very early on. And it was them that taught me that, where it was like, oh, wait, if we just if someone makes the decision to go on this journey, to do that discovery, we can flip, we can shift, we can change our...
So I want to hear about your new business. So you have a studio and you are doing innovative things in there. I'd love to hear about that, and how can people utilize the work that you're doing?
Yes, Shift Space. So Shift Space is a studio network of innovators, designers. It's me tapping into this almost 18 years of relationships, networks, trust, experience, and knocking back on those doors and bringing in designers, bringing in that imagination that I keep talking about. Like, how am I not talking about imagination, but bringing it to the table? It's me identifying people who have done the work to work with biomaterials and are ready with the biomaterials that can be the replacers for toothpaste, for cups, for packaging. And that's what we're doing. We're working with D studios, working with R&D directors at universities, and working to get designers inside. I've had designers call me from, hey, I dropped out of Parsons because I keep creating these packages that come from the planet and that are just as natural as an orange. But I'm finding out that it's not beneficial for me to keep doing this because it doesn't work with the business model and what is being taught for it as a student, but also too just the traditional world of design for pay. It's not about how are you utilizing the planet, how are you utilizing the planet, how is it regenerative, but also how are you just building a new business model that doesn't exist. So what do? We get on the phone with the universities that we have relationships with, the innovative labs, and get them lab space, identify grants, connect them with foundations, really just looking through the network of solutions and of doers. And just like you say, these good people exist everywhere. These smart people exist everywhere. The people who are wanting to do more, wanting to go further, they're in all of these places and spaces. And it's the time to give them space, give them attention, but also give them investment and funding. And that's what Shift Space is doing. We're making those barriers smaller, but also like telling stories too. So it's the products that I talked about and being able to impact those supply chains, but also how are we telling the story of the planet? My niece has completely inspired me with nature documentaries. I wasn't a person that grew up looking at them. I didn't know who any of these people that I've worked with my entire life were when I was meeting them for the first time. And now I'm sitting back at home watching them because my niece wakes up and this is what she's watching. This is what she's interested in. She's like, oh, I want to work at the aquarium. I want to work at the zoo. I want to be with the animals. I want to be with the land. But what does it look like for us to tell the story of the earth, tell the story of the planet in its beauty, in its current despair, but also its truth, and trying to work to shift people's relationship with the land, relationship with the planet, relationship with the ecosystem and world around them. But also to like play with I want to play with the secessions of the world. I want to see scripted shows where we are bringing like products into the world and putting them in people's faces. Like I grew up looking at the Kardashians eat salads out of these different containers that they were tossing the salad, and that just became a popular thing. But how do you take a moment like that and shift how people perceive a bottle or shift how people perceive a straw? I remember when Oprah had her stainless steel straw and we were cheering from the environmental waves, but how do you bring more of that in? And I want to utilize entertainment and leverage entertainment and story and voice and culture to be able to work on that right now and for the next 10 years and see what we can do, what we can impact, what we can change, what laws we can make laws, what laws we can make laws, and what spaces we can build.
So it sounds like, I mean, I love that you're removing obstacles. I think that's pretty powerful. And I love that you're talking about, was it your niece, you said?
My niece.
Yeah, your niece, because it's the young people that ask the questions like, why are we doing this? And they ask, with the innocence of like, gosh, there's a different way to do it. They see it very clearly. And we're so, as adults ingrained in the status quo that it's very hard for us to, we don't question it. And it's great to engage with, we've been talking about different generations, kids that are super young, help us see a window into the world of what's possible and helps us ask the questions of that we're not asking on our own. So I love that you're removing obstacles. If people want to engage with you, if there's a business owner or a brand that is trying to conquer some sort of or achieve some sort of goal and they see all these obstacles, can they engage with you? Is your studio available to help others?
That's a great question. I love that. Is your studio available to engage with them? We are. We're open.
I love that. And, it's been very inspirational speaking to you, and I'm excited and hopeful. A lot of times I get down because is change happening fast enough? But talking to you, I see that there are change makers and you have a very powerful platform for making change happen, removing the obstacles. So I thank you for sharing your story with us, and I hope others will be inspired by you as well. And thank you so much, Jordan, for joining the podcast today.